So we're sitting here, and you guys are going to have to help me out on your last names. I know it's Tony and Kevin, but
Alcazar.
Tony Alcazar.
Kevin Crompton.
Kevin Crompton. Head brewer for Epic Brewing Company. Head chef for the Bottle Room. We just had an absolutely amazing beer dinner for, Epic, the Bottle Room. So I have some questions for you guys about this. Obviously, we had some great beer, great food. Did you decide the beers first, or did you have some food items in mind that you wanted to do first, or which came first?
They were both same time. I knew that their beers would be awesome with food.
Okay.
That was the first thing. Second thing is the cherries, peaches. That's summer. So this is probably the first beer dinner where I decided about 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. In advance, I knew that I wanted to do this for summer.
Cool.
So I basically took the beers and I worked the food around that.
Cool.
It wasn't hard. Peaches work well with pork. Cherries work well with whatever. And I decided to put them with salmon this time.
Yeah, that was really unique.
That's part of the way that I wrote the menu this time.
Cool.
Different.
And now what possession, we had some really unique food, and we also had really unique beers to pair with. So brainless on cherries and brainless on peaches and the Utah sage, you're really putting some really unique ingredients into some traditional styles. Where does that come from your point of view?
Well, if we didn't have a three-tier product line, it would make it really hard to do that kind of stuff. So, the Exponential series is perfect for that type of a vehicle.
Cool.
A lot of the Exponential series beers, they don't have as much broad appeal to the audience,
okay.
but they tend to hone in on one specific type. And
I see.
Like the Sage Saison, it doesn't appeal to a large audience of people, but there's a small slice of people, and you pair it with the right dish. It just rings the bell.
Yeah.
Because it really seems like, probably more than any other brewery that I can think of, when you look at your Exponential series, it just screams to be paired with food.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool, and we're having so much fun. Kenny down at Cabo Taco, I know you probably had a ball with this one.
I did.
And it's really unique to see how different chefs took the same inspiration for a beer like Brainless on Cherries or the Utah Sage and jumped totally different ways. You went really out of the box. I think, like you were saying when you were talking about the beer, that with the Utah Sage it goes really well with the roasted birds and the fowl, the chicken, and pheasants and turkey, and honestly, right there too, I think that's where most people would go, is that Thanksgiving stuffing, sage, roasted bird, and you jumped in a totally different direction. You went with seafood and everything like that, and it still worked really, really good. How did you put that together? How did you figure out with those flavor profiles from the Sage Saison, with the sage and the herbaceousness and the yeast qualities and kind of the weedy quality, how did you figure out that was the dish that was going to work with it for you?
Well, I'll be honest, I did the tasting. I tasted the beers maybe 2 or 3 times before I ever wrote a menu.
Gotcha.
That was one thing.
Okay.
Second thing is I thought, where are other chefs going to take this? And like a beautiful roasted chicken or pheasant or squab would be awesome with the Utah Sage. And I totally agree. I could have actually put the Utah Sage with my pork dish and incorporated sage into the bread pudding for that, and that would have worked.
Yeah.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, how could we do this just a little bit different? And it's not to be different, it's just to bring my own style into the food. So I thought, let's do shrimp grits with sage cheddar, because sage cheddar is,
what the hell?
well, it's sagey.
Yeah.
It's herbaceous, but it's also cheddar, and I think grits and shrimp was a classic combination.
Right.
So I did that, and I thought, okay, how can we tie this dish into with a crisp and clean beer, because it really is, it's still a saison. At the end of the day, it's still a saison, but it's got that herbaceousness and whatever. So we did a little bit of the sweet heirloom salsa with that. And it kind of tied it all. I think it tied it in all really well. As far as that pairing, that's kind of where I went with that. I didn't want to be you know, roasted chicken or roasted, you know, pheasant.
Right.
And so I try to switch it up just a little bit. You know, I think the beers deserve respect.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, I think your beers deserve a lot of respect. They need to be treated like fine wine. And so I wanted to be a little bit different. That's it.
And that's really cool. And you did. You know, that smoked and oaked. Obviously, I think if you paired it with a dessert, which came out awesome. It was very. Again, you took beers to me that I think you did not go the easy route. You did not go the obvious route. Smoked and oaked, and you had a pork belly on the menu. I think anyone would have seen that, and they would have just paired the smoked and oaked with the pork belly and everything like that. You didn't do that. You jumped off again out of the box, yeah, and it still worked really well. And that's what we're trying to do here. We think, you know, especially with Epic beers, your beers are really screaming out for food pairing, and this is a great vehicle for chefs and restaurant owners to show people how well beer pairs with food and how versatile it is. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are looking at this kind of thing, and they're going like, man, there's so many flavors in beer, and they might know a lot about beer and not a lot about food, or vice versa. And so they're like, well, how do I do that? Now, what are your key rules when you're creating a menu? You've got your beers out in front of you. What are your key rules? The number 1, 2, 3 things that you hit to create a menu?
The way that I see pairings with food, as far as beer and food is concerned, is they're either very similar or very different.
Okay.
So they're very, very contrasting but complementing, or they're just so similar that it just works. It has to work.
Blends together.
So the shrimp dish with the sage grits work
Right.
really well with the sage Utah sage saison, whereas the chocolate ice cream and the bacon sprinkles work really well with smoked and oak, because they're slightly different.
So yeah, we're looking at pairing foods. I understand what you're saying with you still have an element, like in the chocolate ice cream cone and the smoke, you put the bacon in there, and the bacon is the bridge, right, from the smokiness.
Exactly.
So you basically looked at his brewing techniques and the items, whether with the white wine barrels or the red wine barrels or the sage, or all of the elements that he was using in brewing these unique beers, and just to make sure you included aspects of that in the food as well, to just create bridges.
Yes.
You know, so that they do pair really well. And I think that's a really important point, that it might seem, you know, it might seem like it's common sense, but I think it's good to go over it and say it, that, you know, if you're doing something with a beer that's as unique and as unusual as your beers, that you can use and mimic those techniques in your cooking or in your dish, or look for those to really bring in those bridges that tie it together and make for an amazing pairing. And now, what do we have coming up next from Epic? I mean, we've seen some awesome stuff. You've been blowing our brains out of the back of our head. You've been out here for 6 months, and we've been just loving all this variety of beers. You have 35 different beers. And you said that's constantly growing. So,
Yeah.
so what's next on the horizon?
Well, I've got a bunch of fun beers planned.
Cool.
And I'd love to talk about them. You know, up until just last week, we've been so limited by our fermentation capacity. We just went through an expansion and increased our fermentation capacity by 20%, which is actually really big. That's
What about, was it the fermenters or was it the brew house?
Fermenters.
Okay, so
tanks.
cool. And you were using 15, 30 barrel tanks? What kind of?
80 barrel tanks.
80. You were using 80 barrel.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we brew 8 times into it. So we do a 24-hour brewing cycle.
Wow.
And because we have a 4-vessel brew house, we're able to hit the fermenter every 2.5 to 3 hours with another batch of brew.
And how big's your brew house?
10 barrels.
It's only a 10 barrel brew
Yeah,
house?
we do about 35 brews a week
God.
off of our brew house. Yeah, it's insane.
Wow, that's pretty crazy.
It's high production on a small system.
Wow,
And
that's
so
nuts.
We're a high output small footprint brewery, and I mean we'll probably do 10,000 barrels out of that place this year.
Wow.
That's hilarious.
Coming up,
Right.
We've got a pro-am beer that's coming up.
Okay.
That is, if you're not familiar, a pro-am beer is where you take a amateur home brewer from your market, and you take a homebrew recipe that they've won awards, at AHA sanctioned brew judged events.
Yeah, AHA, American Homebrewers Association. Nice.
Association. And then we take their recipe and we make it on a larger commercial scale.
Cool.
So we actually have a continuously hopped single hop IPA coming out.
Oh wow!
In fact, we're brewing it tomorrow. And
Now by continuously hop, you mean are you like? You got like 60 minutes in the boil, right? 90 in the system. So are you adding a hop addition every what?
10 minutes.
Every 10 minutes.
Yeah. And
So
actually, the recipe called for a hop addition every 5 minutes.
okay.
And we were able to tone that down just a little bit and get what we wanted out of it.
Cool.
And we do continuously hopped single hop IPA.
And what hop?
Yeah, that was my question.
yeah.
What hop?
CTZ. So
Oh,
it's going to be like
Chinook, Tomahawk, and Zeus. That's
So that's going to be a lot of fun. We also have a holiday seasonal beer coming out.
Okay.
That is a porter that is brewed with blackberries and spruce tips.
Wow.
Blackberries and spruce tips.
That's that's again what we're talking about here with pairing food. You got a porter brewed with blackberries and spruce tips. You pair that with a blackberry cheesecake. You just tie the blackberry right into it. I mean,
I'm not thinking cheesecake.
Well, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking like maybe duck with like a blackberry.
Okay,
sauce.
yeah. He's the chef.
Yeah,
I'm not a chef. I'm just a fat guy. Now you've got a pumpkin porter coming out.
We do. It's a collaboration brew with DC Brow in Washington DC, and we brewed the same beer last year. It's basically a Baltic porter with pumpkin and spice, but we're calling it an Imperial pumpkin porter because it kind of just rolls off your tongue a little bit better.
Nice, sounds good.
It sounds very homebrew-esque a little bit because homebrewers are really quick to make fusion into beer.
Well, I have to ask you because I did a pumpkin beer last year, and a lot of people really enjoyed it. I took and I have a Homebrew Wednesday video on it. I took pumpkin pie pumpkins, roasted them in the oven, put them in the mash, put them in the boil, put them in secondary. So, how are you incorporating the pumpkin in there?
Yeah, we have found a company that sells aseptic pumpkin puree.
Okay.
And originally we took a portion of this and we put it in the mash. We took a portion of it and we put it in the kettle. We took a portion of it and we put it in the fermenter.
Okay.
We found that didn't work for us the way we wanted it to.
Okay.
So what we've adopted is that we buy aseptic pumpkin puree. We pump it directly into the fermenter before the fermentation even starts.
Okay.
Because you get this solid mass of pumpkin solid is what they call
Yeah.
it. Is the thick portion
Meat.
of it.
Yeah.
And so that stuff doesn't really work well in the mash, and we add it directly to the fermenter, so it goes through the fermentation. It makes it so that you can't crop viable yeast off of it because you're cropping more pumpkin puree than you're cropping yeast. So it's a dead end source for the yeast.
Okay. So you're only gonna use yeast that you've already used.
Yeah.
Probably, used already. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So we thought about we could crop from one Imperial pumpkin brew and pitch it onto another Imperial pumpkin brew.
Yeah.
That would be acceptable.
Yeah.
But we can't pitch it onto something else.
Yeah.
It's
just gonna.
You really know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have no idea.
Another thing is, and I think you'll appreciate this, is that when we did the test brews, we bought like Libby pumpkin pie mix, right? and I'm reading the back of the thing and it says, contains spices and other artificial flavors, and I'm like, well, what are they? They're not going to tell you,
Right.
And I'll bet you that not to say anything bad about Libby, but I'm sure that they're buying the cheapest spice and the cheapest vanilla that they can get on their market because really that's going into a pie, right?
Right.
I'm putting it in a beer. That's a lot more important in my opinion.
Yeah.
So what we did is we had to source a pumpkin puree that is non-spiced. And to all the brewers out there that want to make pumpkin beers, try to find a pumpkin puree that does not contain spice,
Right.
so that you can add your own spice.
That's one of the first things whenever I started doing pumpkin beers. That's one of the first things they say, go and find, you can find canned pumpkin that
Without
is
spice.
not pumpkin pie filling. They're very different things, and you can find them. You got to look for them. You got to pay attention to them. But and it was a mess. I have to admit, it was a mess. I took 4 pumpkin pie pumpkins, cut them in half, and roasted them in the oven to really get it all kind of caramely, and then put some in the mash. And I used a very, very light beer. A lot of times when you do a pumpkin beer, you're going to add some crystal or caramel malts to give it that kind of orange color. I didn't. I went with a very base, kind of like a pale ale.
Because you want the color contribution of the pumpkin.
You got it, and it came out this really nice orange color. But I like your pumpkin porter idea a little better.
I was gonna say, pumpkin and pork to me is like a really fall.
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And I think that the same kind of spices that apply to pork will apply to pumpkin and vice versa.
Okay.
For me, like if I was gonna do a pumpkin dessert,
Okay.
I would really get into like the coriander, obviously the cumin, the clove, the cinnamon. That kind of stuff is very, of course,
Yeah, like with pork, one of my favorite things is annatto in pork.
Okay, yeah.
Might be a little wacky pumpkin.
For beer that might be weird.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're gonna try to be a little bit different, there's the coriander, there's the caraway, for me, coriander and pork is like, it's so awesome.
Coriander goes big in beer too.
The cumin also is really awesome in there. Fennel seed.
Right.
Another awesome.
Yep. They use that to make artificial maple extract. It's fenugreek. I'm thinking fenugreek.
That's different.
That's a little different.
Fenugreek's a little bit different, but then you got the mustard seed. Stuff that goes well with pork. Is mustard seed, brown sugar, molasses, vanilla bean. Stuff like that. Think a little bit outside of the box. You could think a little bit pumpkin pie, but if you start thinking of like the spices that go well with pork.
That's a good point.
I think those kind of things would be awesome in beer.
Yeah, that would be.
I
be
make
really cool.
my pork belly for the dish tonight with the Brenda's on peaches. I have obviously sugar and salt for the rub.
Right.
But there's vanilla, there's coriander, there's caraway, there's fennel. I have like maybe 20 ingredients in the rub just for the pork belly. And it sits in that for 2 to 3 days.
Wow.
And then we wash it off, and then we braise it in beer.
Wow.
So how long? Because I was tasting that. I'm like, you must have cooked this for like a day and a half.
Yeah, no. Well, I'll tell you what.
Put it in a crock pot or something.
No. I'll tell you the whole process. Okay. And if you want the recipe, I'll give you the recipe.
Oh.
And I have it written down. Don't worry. So I get my spice rub, which it's 2 parts. Right here you have half sugar, half brown salt. And over here you have all those other spices that I just talked about.
Okay.
And it's coriander, it's clove, it's vanilla, it's caraway, fennel. All those things.
Right.
Cinnamon stick. And then basically you grind these and you mix them with these.
Okay.
So it's a very salty, very sweet, very spicy. It smells so amazing.
I bet.
I have some back there. You guys want to smell?
That sounds
It's
awesome.
seriously amazing. So you rub the bellies with that, or if you have a leg or a shoulder, you rub it in there, leave it in there, leave it in the refrigerator for like 2 to 3 days.
Okay.
When you're ready to cook it, you wash it.
Well, so you take that off.
You wash it because if you don't, the salt and the sugar, especially the sugar, if you don't wash it off, it's gonna crust. It's gonna
caramelize.
It's gonna be too gross.
Okay.
So you want to get it off, and then you roast it. And once it's roasted,
Just like in an oven?
Just in an oven, just like a turkey.
Okay.
For about an hour.
Okay.
And then once it's really nice and dark and it's actually rendered all its fat out, then you cover it. You add a little bit of beer in it. So I braise it with a little bit of your Renaissance peaches because I didn't want to. It's a little bit expensive, and so I ordered a little bit of the lager that we have. So I covered it and cooked it for another 2 hours. So it cooked for 3 hours.
Okay.
Okay. And then, I took it out and I let it cool down overnight, and then I was able to cut it real nice. That's basically the process that we do for the pork belly here. But, it's tons of spices.
It was so good, dude. And then that's just one aspect. You had the puree, and then you had the bread pudding kind of
thing,
stuffing thing, and I see what you meant about it with it. It's kind of sweet and kind of,
So it's kind of the concept of like a pumpkin pie for me. It's like it's either a pumpkin pie or a pork.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You can
Well,
do either way.
I've been wanting to do a pumpkin saison.
Wow, that's interesting.
I think a pumpkin saison, especially for fall with that rustic farmhouse yeast, if you just did a straight saison and did the pumpkin in the middle, I think that could be really pretty cool.
I'm gonna write a little.
So there you go.
memo.
Yeah,
There you
no,
go.
a year from now.
You know what?
we'll see
That's
pumpkin
fine.
saison.
I'm gonna homebrew it, but you know, if I see it from Epic, I'll be ecstatic.
happy.
I'll be
You'll be
happy,
very
dude.
happy.
I totally want to do a good solid saison recipe. Take the roasted pumpkin in the mash, pumpkin in pull the color again like I did with the other one, but with a rustic farmhouse style yeast. I think that could be a real fun beer to do. And I think again that could pair with food awesomely. And then you have someone like Stone, the Stone Brewery collaboration, where they did a pumpkin beer made with pumpkin, but they used like lemon verbena and a bunch of different other herbs that had nothing to do with pumpkin pie spices. And so it didn't taste like a pumpkin. Did you get to try that one at all?
Which one is that?
It's got a huge Spanish name, the Citriel,
Oh,
whatever. You know what I'm talking about? That one, it was very unique. You can't really call it a pumpkin beer because even though it's made with pumpkin, it's not the pumpkin that makes a pumpkin beer, it's really the spices.
Yeah. No,
It really is. You know,
there's
so
definitely something to be said about the spices.
No, but your beers sound awesome. Your beers are so awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, man.
No, definitely is a privilege and an honor to be here.
Oh, thank you. It's
Cool.
a privilege to host
yeah,
you.
totally.
I've been looking forward to this for at least 6 months.
Serious. I found out you were going to be here. I'm like, if I can sit down with these guys and just pick their brains about food and about beer, I'm like, dude, I'm enjoying the shit out of this.